everyone, welcome to the Culture Week debating. I just want to introduce you to two judges. This is Mrs. Bosman and Mrs. van Straten, and they'll be judging the debating today. I just want to say good luck and I'll be listening, okay? Why are the speakers? But I thought it was 2. It's 2:02.
Okay, there you go.
So you're still muted.
Jaden, why are you looking bad? Hi, gents.
Hi, sir.
Okay, so this is live streamed, boys. So you are in your numbers. You are at your best behavior. No funny haircuts and no funny sign language. Parents are watching from every corner and teachers. So yeah, welcome to Culture Week, you guys. Culture Week debates are always fun and exciting. You get your best debaters or experienced debaters versus the so-called inexperienced debaters or gents that don't have time really to fit it into their schedule. But they're great speakers nonetheless. We do have people like Francois, who reckons himself to be a good speaker. So we'll see how that's gonna work out. So, Ushhouse has received the motion already versus De Beer, so they'll go. But then I think the next house is it Nafisha?
So Nafisha and no.
Yeah.
Okay, Francois and Ika can't hear you guys talk.
So it's not Fisher versus no.
Okay, Nafisha and Null House. Okay, and you'll get your motion as well. Okay, do you quickly want to do a meet and greet of your teams and the players that you have in your teams? Do the captains want to do that quickly? So from Ushhouse, I'll start with Ushhouse. Daniel Mackay, just introduce your speakers.
I'm Daniel Mackay, and my second speaker, well, I'm speaker 1. My second speaker is Daniel Bloom of Ushhouse. He's a Form 4, very astute speaker, honored debater. He's recognized in many debating circles. He's debated overseas. We've been together to India, done many debates there on women's rights, general legislation, border trading, stuff like that. My researcher is Yazini, great behind a keyboard, great, with information. He's sharp as a tack, always reliable. And yeah, it's keen. It's going to be a good debate today.
Great, that's Ushhouse. Nafisha?
So we have Ika here, possibly the best debater in the world, unofficially. And then we have myself, Francois van Rensburg, also a top debater within the country and a top history student within the school. And then and then we have Hayden, Joel, and Alex as our researchers.
Awesome. The next house, please, Tipia.
Good day, Mr. Speaker, and to all who are watching us from home or wherever you are in the country today. My name is Jaden van Beek. I am, in fact, the #1 history student at the moment at the college. You can ask Mr. Ndora. I've compromised the team. I'm myself, the first speaker, Alexander Yaitman, the second speaker, and we have two very keen researchers, Sahil Naidu and Andreas Filippo, each #1 in their form, respectively, for academics. So I think it's safe to say that the beer is not coming to play around when it comes to both the research and the implementation of the debate. We have two very strong speakers who Alex and I have spent many days away. We've actually traveled Croatia together on a water polo tour, and at the same time we conducted various debates around our travels. So without any further ado, I believe we should get this debate on the go so we can do the most.
Yeah, the beer house, fun stuff. Although your information is quite unreliable, you said you're a top history candidate, but anyway, we'll leave that for some other time. Murray House. Oh God. Okay, can we have Baloy? McRobert?
So I believe the other houses will join later as the debates take place later.
I don't think they have the passion for debating like we do.
Josh,
Francois was full of it.
Why?
Okay, cool. So we happy? I'm going to release the motion. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna release the motion now for Fisher and De Beer. Well, not De Beer and Fisher. Can I see just the list quickly?
So is it not Noel and no way
It's Nolan and Fisher, and I believe it's Ush and the.
Yeah, so we're on it. So your motion is as follows. In fact, I'll type in the chat box as well. Okay. There it is. So listen carefully.
Do you know what, Kenneth? You should put your speakers off. That's all.
Okay, so here it is. This house supports the privatization of ESCOM. This house supports the privatization of ESCOM. Okay, got that?
So who's prop and who's op?
Okay, we'll sort that out quickly now.
So
Left Fisher is op, and then Noel is prop. Are we all good with that? Okay, so Noel and Ned Fisher, you've got an hour to go and prep while we listen to Ush and Ned Fisher in the meantime. Okay, so you should be back.
So Ush and the beer, I believe, sir.
Ush and De Beer, yeah. Well, I'm saying Noel and Ned Fisher are going to prep for the next 35 minutes. Thanks, boys. Okay.
So what time should we be back?
35 minutes from now.
35?
Yes.
What?
Do you want an hour? Let's do an hour.
Sorry, Josh.
10 past 3 days, 10 past 3 days, you're back on the meet.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Bye. Cool. So we'll start now so we've got team op and team prop, Ush and De Beer. Okay, so we'll go with prop first. First speaker.
That'll be me.
Thank you.
I'll stop my own clock, it's fine. All right. Good afternoon to the House at large. My name is Daniel Mackay and I'm prop speaker 1 for Ush House. Our motion was, Our motion was the media industry promoted family values and good deeds above everything else, unlike contemporary media culture. We are Team Prop and we are for this point. The 80s were a period of wholesome and family values. Media portrayed happy families, white picket fence, 2 kids, a dog, a car, perfect life. Holidays were cherished because within families there were time to spend together, time to be relished, time to appreciate. As in those days, family was not something taken for granted. The media in the time played a huge role in this. See, through television, through the news, through film, these ideas were perpetuated and highlighted amongst these communities. Shows like Full House showed a family in a difficult situation, struggling to get through these hardships, but doing it through the power of their own family. And this prosperity can be found within each other. It wasn't an easy situation, but it created an idea that no matter what form or identity your family takes, there's still hope and possibility. Movies, classic movies like E.T., Mrs. Doubtfire also perpetuated these ideas. It's an idea of a family coming together and helping a seeming alien, such a strange concept, but yet so familiar through the common shared idea of family values and good deeds. It's general good deeds towards a stranger, but a stranger in need. As people, we can identify this because in the 80s and 90s, these ideas have been perpetuated. Everyone felt the same and viewed it similarly. Another very classic show, one of my personal favorites, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. This shows a young Will Smith thrown into a new environment, people he doesn't know, family he's never met, but through struggle and through hardship, they learn to love each other and they form a family, which showed the people of the world that these values can be created and formed, made it possible, gave them hope. This perpetuated and continued into the greater society, greater culture. These cultural phenomenons molded the views that people had. I mean, everyone had a TV. It was the 80s. Everyone was taking this media. It was everywhere. And the fact that it perpetuated and highlighted such positive, good deeds or family values just added to the overwhelming sense of community amongst people in that time. I would like to now compare it to the current situation with the media. I believe our media in the moment portrays a very sick culture. Men are allowed to sit around the table in podcasts, perpetuate misogyny, sexism, racism. The media and social media itself has provided these people with a platform to spread hate. It varies so differently from the idea of Full House. You know, take it back to the 80s. The values are different. And we form this for ourselves. Materialism, greed, there's a niche to fill. There's people that they want to satisfy and they're willing to let their own values go to appease this. People like Andrew Tate, who's been blowing up in the media at the moment, is extremely popular for his very questionable opinions on women and their rights that they bestow. I think the fact that he's not only been given a platform, but a very popular platform, and his ideas are promoted because the sense of anonymity on social media is disgusting. Television in the 80s was surrounded by happiness and positivity over Christmas periods. Holidays were something to be cherished. The family values were highlighted. It was a wonderful time. I mean, it's the most wonderful time of the year. It's Christmas, for example. I think we've lost our way as a community in our sense of value and character. And this has been grossly perpetuated through the gross control that the media has over our everyday lives. Thank you.
All right, that is first speaker.
Sorry, so we can't.
Your mic is muted.
Cool. So that was first speaker prop. So now we're moving on to first speaker opposition. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, my name is Jaden from Macon. I'll be the opposing speaker from the beer, and let my time start now. So we have adapted the motion in the following manner. We believe that the media industry did not, in fact, promote family values or good deeds above everything else in both the 80s and 90s, but rather promoted a series of bad values and destructive behavior. This can be seen as follows. The 1990s could be seen as a transitional decade as far as the media is concerned. Movies like Fight Club, Seven, and Pulp Fiction would have a drastic impact on society for years to come. These cult-like films still have a grip on society today. These films and TV shows criticize family values, such as Fight Club. Popular TV series like The Simpsons promote abuse over good deeds over anything else. This can be seen in how the most memorable scenes are those in which Bart Simpson's son is abused by his dad, and often the scenes which you remember are those which are cruel or inhumane in nature. The media also promoted the use of narcotics rather than family values. This can be seen in how cocaine usage peaked in the year 1982, with a shocking 10.4 million users in the US alone. A great part of the reason for this was the use of such substances and narcotics were heavily promoted by the media, and people would give anything and everything to be like the ones they saw on TV were. The boom of television shows in both the 80s and the 90s not only allowed a platform for negative influences to be broadcasted to young children, but it also saw new generations spending more time indoors than ever before. After World War II, crime rates increased in the US between the years of 1960 and 1981. Property crime more than doubled over the same period. It shows that so-called good deeds and family values were not, in fact, what was being promoted by the media in the time frame, but rather a trend of violence, theft, and consequential behavior. Media were also been used to promote the national party's white minority rule in the South African contest. The NP had full control of the SABS and hence monitored and vetted anything that went through the media channels. So it would be rather inaccurate to say that the media promoted good family values when it was promoting the oppression of Black people in South Africa for so long. We find it ironic that despite the claims made by the proposer that films and TV series promoted family values, the top 10 grossing films of the time period inflicted had nothing to do with family values, but rather films such as Terminator, Jurassic Park, and even Independence Day. This shows how the media was more concerned with promoting aliens on a global scale than they were with promoting the white picket or family values, which the speakers addressed.
Do you mind if I POI quickly, Jaden?
Is there allowed to be POIs in the opening statements?
Yeah, after the first minute and a half, there usually is. So I assume you accept. I just want to go back to the point on you linked mass drug usage in 1982 to a very vague statement about it being promoted on television. Do you have any factual backing? You can give me a film as an example, that's great, but are there any facts or numbers that back this, any links, any articles, anything at all?
Well, if you listen to the opening statement, it actually said that there were a convicted 10.4 million users of drugs, of cocaine in the US. So I believe statistics don't lie because there's a true reflection of what's going on in the population in the country at any given time. After all, that is what statistics are for. I do believe if you look at media or any TV show, no matter, that aside from, I couldn't even recall the TV show that you said, because the reality of the situation is that people don't watch 80s and 90s TV shows. Instead, I apologize. I would rather like to focus on statistics and things that are measurable and not public influence or opinion. And that is my time for the opening statement. So I will hand over to my second speaker.
Am I allowed to speak now?
Yes, it's running out of time.
So who's speaking now? Oh, I just wanted to talk about the link to cocaine usage and media at the time. You can see it especially in Western media in the early 90s and Eastern, well, not Eastern media, but Eastern underground media in Eastern Europe, especially, where anarchism and grunge was really promoted by bands such as Sex Pistols, Deftones. A lot of bands at the time were promoting drug use, and you can see that as desensitizing a lot of the population at the time, and that would be clear. I think it would be clear that the promotion of drug use by rap in the late 1990s and grunge music in the Eastern Europe would contradict family values.
Alex, do you mind if I enjoy the tone this is taking up? It feels conversational, if I can just add. I understand where you're coming from. I get the music, but unfortunately, I listen to them. The bands like Sex Pistols and Deftones, they serve to a very specific niche of people. And I understand that they do desensitize, but they desensitize a lot of things. They desensitize sex on the media, violence, gang violence, all of it under the sun, right? And there wasn't a spike of gang violence in 1982.
Okay, thank you, James. Your time is up. Okay, can I have second speaker, Prop?
I think that's me. So good afternoon to House at Large. My name is Daniel Bloom, and I'll be the second speaker. I'm gonna start off with a bit of rebuttal. Firstly, I'm gonna go on the point of The Simpsons. They mentioned The Simpsons and how it showed bad values and everything like that, and the strangling of Bart Simpson or whatever like that. But I want to focus on the fact that although Simpsons did have those bad things, it also showed a room for growth. It showed that even in these tough times, even when Bart is getting bullied or whatever's happening in the series, they still stick together as a family and they overcome the greater evil in the series. And then also, I want to also go on the point of Jurassic Park, which may have shown dinosaurs and bad things like that, but also the core of the movie, the core of the plot was promoted around family and the idea of family sticking together and always being like together, which shows in our proposal about the good family values that the 80s and 90s promoted. Sorry, so let me just read that.
Second motion.
Sorry. I would also like to continue on the point that Dan made. So in the 80s and 90s, the idea of a perfect family was portrayed. Obviously, you mentioned the white picket fence and everything, like a nice house, happy wife, happy life. And many TV series around the 80s, 90s promoted this. And even the ones that didn't, like I explained in The Simpsons, they still had glimpses of this like growth of the family and this beautiful, perfect family setting. And yeah, so it also showed the 80s and 90s, a lot of the TV series also showed a lot of them doing good deeds for the community and everything like that. And then I also want to compare that to what we see nowadays in our media today. So in the media today, we are drowned in fake social media series such as Keeping Up with the Kardashians. These media shows a clear division between the family and promotes being fake, which is a word we use to describe phony activities. And it promotes, like, in a way, the idea that a family isn't perfect, which is realistic, but it encourages the idea that, against our proposition, sorry, someone's just reading it in there, it encourages the idea that families, they don't promote, the series themselves don't promote the family values, and they don't show good deeds and stuff like that, which then causes, as Jaden said, except more at large in today's society, crime rates increasing, house rents increasing, and everything like that. On top of this, every type of social media we see today goes against, yeah, Jaden?
Sorry, but just a POI, I think it's quite like ironic to think that it would only infiltrate decades later. The crime rates are actually low in America right now with all these TV shows, and the domestic violence is higher substantially right now. But one cannot say that it takes 30 years for the consequences of such a TV show to infiltrate. So obviously, at the time was not covering family values, because that would be the norm, but not.
Sorry, Jaden. I appreciate.
So, sorry, can you just quickly say that again? Sorry, I got a bit distracted there. But so Jaden, you can say that again.
Essentially, I said that it wouldn't take 30 years for an ideology to filter through. The values weren't being promoted in the time frame, so it's
yeah, exactly what you're saying. You're saying that it wouldn't be implemented in 30 years. It's not going to take 30 years for this to happen. So how are you able to state that in the 80s and 90s it was happening due to the series, but now it's still happening compared to this due to the 80s and 90s series, like the media? I'm saying that the 21st century media is portraying a much worse version than what the 80s and 90s did. And although I'm acknowledging that the 80s and 90s did show this, it's just much more at large and everything like that nowadays. Yeah, Alex?
Never mind, man. I'll talk about time.
Okay, perfect. So anyway, like I was saying, so every type of media we see goes against the idea. Music is now misogynistic, and everything that we intake on a regular basis in the 21st century goes against the idea of positive family ideas and good deeds. Although in the 80s and 90s, music was based around love and compassion and being good to other people, and was promoted in core family values. Music, movie series, and TV series, they all influence a lot of people, and especially in the 21st century. And I personally feel that in the 80s and 90s, those caused more of a society to build, which now leads us to today, where society is blooming. Thanks to the 80s and 90s. And then back to the 80s and 90s, every media platform was promoting a respectful base for families in general. The media focused on the inclusion of everyone and a perfect family. It created a sense of safety in the media by showing the deeds and values of the families to be positive, much like a tree needs photosynthesis to survive. The media in the 80s needed great values to survive. Yeah, Alex?
Just on the topic of safety during the media in the 80s and everything, I just wanted to check what color your Bugatti was.
You know what, that is actually a very good point, and I'm sorry that I didn't include that in my debate. Yeah, I'll tell you what, no, that's a very good question. I really do apologize. Very, very good question. I don't actually have a response to that. So I think I'm just gonna end my time there. Thank you very much for listening.
Oh, okay. Are you done, speaker?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there you have it, gents. So now we are going to start having replies. So now I'm giving the opportunity for opposition to reply.
Can I go? So.
Yep.
I just wanted to, so we talk about how you mentioned it yourself, how there were problems with media in the 80s and 90s. And I believe that, well, this house believes that during the early 2000s, we can see an emphasis on those bad values. We can see movies such as Fight Club coming out in the late 1990s and Pulp Fiction coming out in the late 1990s, going into the early 2000s, where the people you mentioned, Kim Kardashian and everyone, would, both Fight Club and Kim Kardashian would be idealized during this time. So we can see that it was during the 1990s, mostly, some in the 1980s, maybe to the later stages, but it was during this time that the values that are seen as untraditional or not being family values are emphasized today. It comes from during that time, is what this house is trying to say.
Team Prop acknowledges your point, and we appreciate your.
Okay. I.
Yeah.
Okay. So, gents, did we have our op has responded? So now we'll have our prop response. The reply speaker. Alex, that was a reply, right? You are a reply speaker. Okay, can I have a reply speaker from team opposition? No, prop, sorry. Then we're done.
So when you say a reply speaker, you mean wrap it up and tell the.
Yes, so each team will speak 3 times. First speaker, second speaker. The third speaker is the reply speaker.
I don't believe that Alex was given.
Yeah, so
enough. Can you please go again?
Oh, is okay.
Giving
Yeah,
us
the second speaker. Alex, do you give us your speech then? Thanks.
Yeah, cool. So let me just pull it up. First, I want to start off on the topic of The Simpsons and how you mentioned that they were seen as growing. However, this house believes that Homer Simpson is never seen as growing, and neither is his son Bart. And in fact, there are a couple of episodes where the family is shown in the future and they're shown as being apart. I think there's 2 episodes. You can fact check me on that. There's 2 episodes where the family is shown as being apart, and there's one where they are shown as being together. And then after that, you mentioned music during the time. Music during the 80s and 90s would promote love and all of that. And then also your point, Dan, that a lot of media at the time would promote the American dream, essentially. You said the white picket fence and all of that. However, going back to media, to especially films during the 1990s, this is the period that we're focusing on. Films during the 1990s would criticize the family values. And like I said, we see this the most during Fight Club, where the idea of consumerism is rejected and materialism is rejected. And then with the music, Dan, your point that the music promoted love. In fact, music was not promoting love at that point. That was the 70s, I would say. 70s was promoting love, peace, not war.
Freddie Mercury. Yeah.
Sorry?
Freddie Mercury, dog.
Yeah, true, Freddie Mercury, but Freddie Mercury was one of the few. I mean, during that time, especially in Eastern Europe at the time was heavily based around rock, and a lot of rock was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you know? A lot of rock was not love, it was not peace, it was anarchy. And that is that. Thank you.
Ladies and gents, there you have it. That's a reply from the opposition. And now can we have a reply from the props, Daniel and Mikai and the team?
I appreciate your reply to us. I unfortunately identify a very flaky and thin closing to your debate, which is unfortunate. I hate to have to unpack it, but unfortunately it's just the nature of this conversation. I felt the nitpicking of different Simpsons episodes is very handy in creating a narrative about a Simpsons-based debate, but that's not what this is. This is about 20 years, a 20-year time period. And unfortunately, 2 episodes of The Simpsons is not going to define the entire decade, or both decades in that matter. I also believe that, just personally, I have viewed this show as many others have, and it is very slapstick and satire, but there are also episodes where you can visually see characters forming relationships and getting closer. There are heartfelt moments, I think, and I don't want to nitpick like you guys did, but I think it's just a little bit futile to go into these intricacies of these things. I feel the same about your mentioning of Fight Club. I believe it's the only real movie that the only one example that you've mentioned. As much as it does support your argument, it's a very, so I'm not taking rebuttal in my closing, sorry. It's a very niche sort of and unhelpful to the broader perspective. I still completely believe that the 80s and 90s promoted family values, good deeds, media portrayed happy families during the holiday time. There was a larger sense of community. And compared to today's world, where it's very blatant that that's not what we promote anymore. We promote toxicity, and the color of Bugattis determines your social worth. It lacks volume and it lacks character. And that's why I believe that the 80s and 90s promoted family values and good deeds, and above all else, unlike today's media. Thank you.
Okay, time is up. Thank you for your reply speech there. Well done to both teams. Okay. Right. So the adjudicators are actually writing down your points and stuff like that. We can give you guys feedback if you want it in written form, but we're not going to be doing it right now unless the adjudicators want to have a word or two. Adjudicators. Okay.
So we didn't get to speak over time. So we only spoke twice with me, and then we didn't get a third speaking opportunity. So I have to close.
Responded. Oh wow, you guys have been talking since forever. Okay. Reply. Reply. Thanks.
All right. So we take this opportunity because unfortunately a rebuttal wasn't given to me during the time, because I believe that there wasn't concrete evidence during his statements to back up what he was saying. So I've actually gathered a list of all the movies that aired during the time. I will not be taking any rebuttals, thank you, because they didn't afford me the opportunity. So we mentioned Jurassic Park, Fight Club, The Simpsons, but the list goes on and on and on. Independence Day, Aliens, The Lion King, Disney's Pride. There's a Toy Story. You're going to tell me that these are movies which reflect the white picket fence mentality? No, they're cartoons. They're ones that do not go past the eye. It's short, meaningless interactions. Also, you guys keep hammering on how 21st century influences are products of the 21st century, when in actual fact, these, such as Andrew Tate, was born in the year 1986, meaning he grew up in the 80s and 90s. He was a product of the circumstances which he grew up in. He fact checked it. He's now, I can't do maths. Unfortunately, it goes past my abilities. But he is the problem. Kim Kardashian was also 80s, 90s baby. Every member of the cast was born pre-the 80s and 90s. So I believe that in our closing statement, we have provided more than enough evidence in order to back up the claim that the media did in fact not idolize good deeds or family values, but rather focused on all other aspects of life. It essentially created a generation which creates toxic masculinity, negative values, violence, anger, and we're all lashing out on it now. People are getting defensive when they get cancel culture, but that is just the generation growing up in the moment. With people we look up to are products of a generation. So the 80s and 90s, in fact, failed us in setting us up for our future. And that is our closing statement. Thank you.
Well done, you guys. Some great speeches there, honestly. Wow. Okay, I'm impressed. Cool. Are there any closing remarks from the floor, if you'd like? I've asked adjudicators. They wouldn't like to say anything at this stage. Anybody want to just...
Can I say something? I'd just like to thank both the beer speakers and your very useful researchers. I'd like to thank Azini and Bloom and you, sir, for facilitating the conversation, all the other staff members. Today is my birthday, and this is probably been the best birthday gift I could have bestowed upon myself today. Much appreciated. I hope you all like my outfit. I tried very hard, and if anybody noticed my 4 swaps of sunglasses, just some credit to you.
Anybody else? Thanks, Danny. Happy birthday. Okay.
I would just like to thank my team. My team actually brought the most today. I don't think we feel the need to manipulate the judges into swinging in our favor the way.
Very low blow. I think there's no real moral manipulation going on. I think this is a very shallow thing trying to be
definitely playing on my heartstrings, but I just like to thank Sayul.
Granted, you did have the interior debate.
And thank you. You had your final remark. Good luck on your 18th. Clearly, you've still got a lot of lessons in life to learn. But I've enjoyed today's debate. It was rather entertaining to view how shallow and opaque some people's viewpoints on certain topics are. Thank you.
Okay. Lots of love there. Thanks, boys. So I am going to now release the motion for Mari versus McRobert. Is Mari and McRobert in the house? Are they on the meet? This is Martin's team. Who's head of McRobert debating? I think it's Yongama. Yongama Kwichana. Where are they?
It's Tulsa and I that are.
Oh,
doing
Tulsa.
debating.
Okay, cool. So McRobert is represented. They're here. Is Mario Houston here? Okay, so I'm gonna release the motion and then we'll go to Nefisha and Null because they've had an hour of prep. Their hour ends at 3 o'clock on the dot. So in the
Mr.
meantime,
Soda,
yeah.
sorry, I just want to remind you that the schedule was also made available to parents, so we can't start until 3:15.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. So I want to take a little bit of break until 3:15 for Null and Nefisha to kick in, and then Mari will go after that. Okay. So is it fine if I release the motion for Mari and McRobert? All good? Amari Gents here. Okay. Mari Gents aren't here. Okay, I'll just give that a second. Okay, we'll take a bit of a break until then. But soon as Mari and McRobert are on the meet, I'll release their motion. In the meantime, we're waiting for Noel and Fisher to finish their prep. Thank you, gents and ladies.
So McRobert is on the meet. Tulsa and I are both here. We're just waiting for Murray.
Okay, here's Martin. Okay,
Hi,
cool.
what's up, what's up?
I have to release the motion, Martin. Your team has not been present.
So, but okay, it's fine. Go.
Okay, thanks. So here is your motion, and I'll type it in the chat box as well, just to make sure. So this house regrets the Rainbow Nation narrative. I'll start again. This house regrets the Rainbow Nation narrative. I'll type it in the chat box.
So debate will begin at quarter.
I'll tell you now. Let me just type it quickly.
So will our debate begin at 4:45?
Well, debate is meant to start at 4:30 according to the schedule. And because parents have received the timetable, so we can't go any earlier than that.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, but I do expect you guys to be back before 4:30 so that you can get on and be ready 4:30 we kick start.
All right, thanks, sir.
Okay, there it is. You can go prep. Thanks. Okay, 3:15, gents. We are having Noel versus Nefisha. It's going to be crazy.
So can I know who is for the statement and who's against the statement for?
Okay, just to clarify that. So Mari is up, and then McRobert is prop. So Mari, you are opposing, and McRobert, you are the proposer. Okay.
Francia, can you just quickly talk? I'm trying to sort out my sound.
Ma'am,
Ma'am, are we
Okay,
proper?
ma'am, Martin has a question for you.
Ma'am, are we
Martin
proper?
Murray.
Yes, ma'am.
Martin, you are off.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're gonna see that. Good luck, okay, ma'am, is it all good? Can you hear us?
Just give me a second. I'm really struggling with my puppy at the moment.
Okay, yeah, but here, from my side, it's all fine. The volume is fine.
Okay, cool. Just gonna end the call a bit.
Hi, sir.
Okay, what is your question?
Sir, can you hear the volume and everything fine?
Yes, I can. Okay, cheers, boys.
Can I apply for one?
So I think you should give me answers.
That's not the time to perpetuate your.
I'm gonna tell this guy who keeps on cutting bricks that he keeps on tripping the power. Can you hear me? Let me put it.
The front shot could be good.
Hi, buddy.
Let's keep this formal, please.
What?
It's 5-minute speeches for.
We'll be back at 10 past, and then quarter past we'll release obviously the times and stuff.
Hello, ma'am. Hello. Ma'am, when are we gonna start, ma'am?
Quarter past is the starting time.
Okay, ma'am. No.
No. Jenks, I just want to remind you that this is being live streamed to parents, so please just keep your comments and your feedback mature and appropriate, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we'll be starting at quarter past. Obviously, we have Noel versus, let's see quick, Noel and Fisher, and Noel is proposition and Nep Fisher is opposition. Okay, yeah.
Can I also just ask that just before you start speaking, just remind the judges of your house, seeing as they are outside judges and do not know which houses you are in. Thank you.
Okay, we're obviously gonna have a first speaker from proposition. That means Noel. You go first. Your name and surname, please, sir.
Joshua Bulbury.
Time starts now.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Good morning to the House at large. My name is Joshua Bulbring, and I'm going to be the first proposition speaker for Noel House. Offensing Maso is going to be my second proposition speaker. The points that I'm going to be speaking about today are how the privatization of Eskom will help remove corruption within the organization and help improve its efficiency. And the points that my second speaker is going to speak about is the fact that how privatization within South Africa and within Eskom is going to benefit competition and benefit small businesses within our country. So firstly, I'm going to start off by providing some definitions within this debate. So we're going to define privatization as the transfer of a business or an organization to private ownership from public ownership. And we're also going to define this debate to existing within South Africa. The winner of this debate is going to be the side which best shows which form of ownership is better for South African people and most benefits South Africa. So the argument that I'm going to be speaking about first is how the privatization of Eskom will help remove corruption within the organization and improve its efficiency. So the premise for this argument is that corrupt organizations are less efficient, and by removing corruption within an organization improves. So as we all know, and we can all agree upon, South Africa, its government and its public organizations are corrupt. And Eskom is no exception to this. Just recently, 2 Eskom employees were arrested for corruption over 2.2 billion rands worth of Eskom contracts that were handed out to employees who were not qualified for the positions. This is a long-standing theme and problem within South African organizations and the South African government, as well as Eskom. And this has damaged Eskom to the point where it can no longer be saved. Eskom has over $20 billion of debt and has consistently been taking multi-billion-dollar bailouts from the South African government and taxpayers' money just to be able to stay afloat and stay running. And even through taking all these bailouts, Eskom haven't been able to solve any of their problems. They are still in debt, they are still corrupt, and they are still incapable of providing adequate electricity to South Africa. This is why we have had load shedding now for 14 years, and recently load shedding has been increasing to more extreme stages. Eskom is incapable of providing an adequate service to the public, and the reason for this is corruption. As I've already said, our government is corrupt and our government is guilty of nepotism. Incapable and unqualified people are put into positions within organizations like Eskom because of who they know rather than what they know, and because they're qualified and suited to best be the person to be in that position. These incapable, corrupt people then give jobs to their unqualified friends, and a vicious cycle occurs where public businesses like Eskom fall into the wrong hands and are unable to function, relying on government handouts just to stay afloat and just to be able to survive. So how is privatizing Eskom going to be able to solve this problem? So the first thing that's going to be able to happen is that private individuals are going to be able to buy shares in Eskom and put their own money and their own interest into the business rather than taxpayers' money. What this is going to do is this is going to provide an incentive to these business owners to try and run Eskom to the best degree that they can, because it's their own money and their own interests at stake. It's not taxpayers' money, and it is not money that doesn't apply to them or doesn't belong to them. They're putting their own financial security at stake, and they can't rely on government handouts if things don't go right. So once they've done this, they're going to put the best people into the positions and stop doing things like nepotism and stop corruption within the organization to try and benefit themselves and to try and improve improve Eskom as an organization. So what this is going to do is it's going to make Eskom more efficient as a result of qualified people now filling positions that were previously occupied by unqualified people. Eskom is going to have more qualified people, and they're going to be able to better be equipped to run as a business. This is going to mean that the corruption and things which were previously stopping projects from being completed and having tenders which didn't actually result in any proper change or any proper procedures being done, this is going to stop happening, and actual progress is going to be made within Eskom, making it more efficient. So then South Africa and South African citizens are going to benefit from this, as Eskom is going to be able to provide more electricity and a better standard of electricity, and things like load shedding and power cuts are not going to be able to occur anymore. This improves our economy for reasons that my second speaker is going to talk about. So if we just provide now a comparative between the two cases, in our proposition case, we have an efficient and incorrupt Eskom, which keeps South Africa powered and improves the economy, which my second speaker is going to speak about now. And in the opposition case, they have an inefficient utility provider, which cannot sufficiently provide power to South Africa. Therefore, our side wins this argument, as we prove the burden which I provided in the start of my speech, that the side that wins is going to be the side which best benefits South Africa and its people. Thank you.
Thank you, first speaker from proposition. Now, may we have now first speaker from opposition? Thank you very much.
Good morning, fellow debaters and adjudicators. Let me just do one last preparation here. I am Francois Jens van Rensburg, Speaker 1 for Nafisha, with Ikacheng and Goma as the Op Speaker 2. Okay, well, first, a few misinterpretations the opposing House has made with regards to the issue. Firstly, assuming privatization removes corruption is simply not right. Let's look at the example of Steinhoff, where a privatized company had corruption among its ranks. These problems are not just state-owned, and thus privatizing the companies will not solve corruption in South Africa. Similarly, it is wrong to assume that privatized companies provide adequate services. Looking at examples like DSTV, who also hemorrhage money, a private company has not provided efficient services. Privatizing will also focus on urban areas, as this is where the main profit will be made, meaning load shedding will actually increase throughout the country, as large parts of the country will not be provided with electricity. Okay, so I will be arguing that the privatization of Eskom will lead to a lack of financial incentive to fund poorer areas, furthering the financial gap in South Africa. Both sides of the House can agree that the system that helps the most people should be in place in South Africa. It is common knowledge that capitalism, and by extension privatization, pushes funds into the hands of the bourgeoisie. The privatization of Eskom will lead to the degradation of many poorer areas in South Africa, as it is less profitable to provide the infrastructure necessary for power consumption in those areas. Private companies are naturally focused on profit creation, while state companies can focus on building a better South Africa, wherein utilities are provided to the entirety of South Africa. Thus, the privatization of Eskom will lessen the standard of living in South Africa, as this will not be the main focus of the new privatized version of Eskom. Therefore, the privatization of Eskom is a moral issue, not a financial one, as privatization will only exacerbate the already globally high inequality rates in South Africa. Thus, the privatization of Eskom should be viewed as an affront to the morality of South Africans. Keeping the company in state hands means our democratically elected leaders can act in our best interests. An argument for the privatization of Eskom is an argument against democracy. An argument against the idea that democracy can place the most capable leaders that represent the views of South Africa as a whole in power. The privatization of Eskom is a societal issue and could lead to events like the privatization of medical aid in America, where power has been placed in the hands of a few monopolist companies, which have pushed the prices into exorbitant areas. The country is in a state where people have to ignore medical issues in the hope of not being punished financially. Therefore, the privatization of Eskom is an affront to the morality of South Africans. Arguing for the privatization would be arguing for the furthering of the wealth gap in South Africa. Privatization would push even more wealth into the hands of the rich and lower the standard of living of the entirety of South Africa, placing power in the hands of a few monopolist corporations. Thus, I believe it has become evident that Eskom is better off as a state-owned company than as a private company. The privatization of Eskom would create more societal issues in South Africa than it would solve. Leaving the privatization as a morally impossible situation to the problems of South Africa. Thank you.
Okay, your time is up. So anyway, some insightful words there from the great Francois van Rensburg. So he would refer to himself as. Anyway, thank you to the two first speakers. Now, can we have the second speaker from Nolhouse? Okay.
I will be starting in 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon to the House at large. My name is Offensa Masoa. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want you for a moment to imagine having to go 24 hours, sometimes even 3 days without having electricity. Yes, I know it may seem crazy, but unfortunately, that's the reality that many South Africans have to go through. And we as a House opposition have to be given the win in this debate because we are the House that is going to be able to solve this problem more effectively than House opposition. So firstly, I'll just have a short piece of rebuttal that I'd like to start off with from the first speaker of opposition. So firstly, the House Speaker of opposition came up here and tried to give us this idea that the privatization of ESCOM will not remove and lessen corruption within the entity. However, we as House Proposition has given enough analysis to justify that without a doubt that privatizing ESCOM will result in less corrupt individuals leading the organization. So just to refresh your minds about the analysis that my first speaker gave. So the premise that we're running on regarding this point is that companies will be more incentivized to run their companies effectively. So obviously the objective of a company is to make money, and individuals who run private companies will be less likely to be more corrupt, because they will obviously being corrupt will result in a less efficient and less profitable business, which is not beneficial to them and their company's fallacies. And secondly, the second speaker gave us the first speaker from House Opposition gave us the idea that load shedding will result in an increase in load shedding and power failures, because there will be because the poorer majority of our country won't be able to have access to load shedding because of the privatization of ESCOM. However, this is a point that I'll be touching on later on in my speech. But just to give you a brief outlook on what it's going to look like, I'm going to be speaking about how there's going to be a bigger market and more competition if ESCOM becomes privatized. Not only will this benefit ESCOM, but it will benefit South African citizens as a whole, which is the burden of proof that my first speaker gave in his speech. Your POI is accepted.
Within this debate, are we assuming that the privatization of ESCOM, the singular company, would mean that we're also allowing the privatization of the electricity company, electricity industry as a whole?
I'll be answering that in my debate. I'll be giving a lot of analysis to answer your question. Hopefully that happens. So again, the metric that we're going to be answering in this debate is which system is going to be more beneficial to South African citizens. We, as House Proposition, believe that privatizing ESCOM will result in an increased market and hence more competition. So currently, as it is, ESCOM is the only South African electric power utility available to South Africans. They supply electricity to most of the citizens in South Africa, right? So in privatizing ESCOM will allow other companies to be able to compete in the market of supplying electricity, right? So to further contextualize this debate, ESCOM, as my first speaker has already mentioned, is a failing company that is going down, is a failing state, is a failing parastatal that is already going down the drain, and it's not a sustainable organization as it is. As my first speaker mentioned, they're relying on bailouts and they don't even make a profit as it is. So it's clearly a company that's not sustainable and is not good for the long-term future of South Africans. So the another main problem, obviously, that ESCOM puts South Africans through is the extreme levels of load shedding. Not so long ago, stage 6 load shedding was introduced, which entails a 6-hour power outage, if I'm not mistaken by now. So currently, there is no open market and there's no other opportunity for other power supplying utilities to help for other power supplying utilities to be able to compete in the market, right? So moving on to my analysis, right? So privatizing ESCOM will result in an open market because more companies will be interested in supplying electricity, because obviously there's going to be a gap in the market and there's going to be opportunity to make money. So why wouldn't businessmen and women be interested in pursuing the electric power utility field? So an open market will obviously result in more competitors. And because of the level of competition, there's going to be more quality, because now companies will be competing with each other to see which company is going to be the best electric supplier. And that will result in a more accessible market, which is something that the first speaker of House Proposition tried to propose that our house will not be able to achieve. So obviously in South Africa, there's two sides. There's the more disadvantaged sides of the country, and there's also the upper class communities in our country, right? So obviously, if electricity was only being supplied to richer people who are able to afford, there's obviously going to be a gap in the market, and companies will be able to, obviously, to be able to recognize that gap. Hence, people who are more disadvantaged will be able to have access to electricity. So now moving on to my comparative or my first point. So house proposition has a better and more efficient system and a more has a better form of ownership and a more efficient system to provide electricity for its citizens. There will be less load shedding and less power outage and less power failure. The house proposition has a flawed system that can't provide electricity efficiently enough. And they have a corrupt parastatal that we rely on to provide electricity for us. There'll be more continuation of load shedding and other power failure issues that we're currently facing in South Africa. So on house opposition side, there'll be no issues that are being solved, and we'll continue falling down the drain as we currently are. So my point is very important because South African citizens have to endure very long hours of load shedding, and it's not beneficial to the economy. It is not beneficial to anyone at all. And I'll be mentioning this in my second point about how it's not beneficial to the economy. Furthermore, it's not beneficial to particularly disadvantaged communities because they have to go through much longer hours of load shedding, and it affects them more. It's really, the point is also relevant because it's a pressing issue, especially as I've already mentioned with the introduction of load shedding stage 6. It shows that it's actually something that needs to be addressed in our country, which makes it a very relevant issue. So moving on to my second point. So my second point is that the privatization of Eskom will result in a better South African economy. So currently as it is, Eskom is very incompetent and it disadvantages entrepreneurs.
Okay, thank you. There, second speaker. Now we'll have second speaker from Neb Fisher.
Can you guys hear me? Great. Starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We as House opposition on this motion stand against the idea that the better system is the more convenient one for us privileged elites. Instead, we provide and we prefer a system that caters to the majority of the South African people, even though we can all acknowledge it has its downfalls. Though the downfalls that we have been presented are infinitely better than the downfalls a privatization of Eskom would be providing us. Because you see, the privatization of Eskom would create mass economic, social, and environmental harms. Good afternoon, my name is Irchen Ngoma, and I am the second speaker for House opposition on this motion. Firstly, I will be arguing how through the increased destruction of the environment, we can believe that the privatization of Eskom is a harm. Secondly, I'll be arguing how this will degrade our relationships with other countries across the border, specifically countries within sub-Saharan Africa, and will leave them vulnerable to Chinese and American neo-colonization. And finally, I will be arguing how if we were to make Eskom a private company, the lack of safety nets provided would make it infinitely harder for all South Africans involved to live a safe and stable life. But firstly, some rebuttal. Now, within the model that they have presented, it might seem that yes, in this fine and perfect dandy world, we will not experience load shedding. But again, as I say in my later points, 1, this cannot be guaranteed, and 2, even if this is guaranteed, the cons that we will see all across the border infinitely worse to the convenience of us not having electricity for a couple hours. My second rebuttal is that even though the thing that they have provided us about how this will open up a market to other companies is 1, outside of the motion of the debate, and 2, a contradiction in the premise that all they would be doing is just buying stocks in Eskom. Even if this were to be true, we have not been given an appropriate model as to how this would not result in a similar monopolization to the creation of Disney and how they have just bought in every other massive animation company and removed competition as a whole. Now, my first positive matter. The increased industrialization that we see through the privatization of Eskom would do irreversible harm to the environment. Thus, we can all agree that within what we have been given, we should not just pick the solution that helps South Africa economically, but it helps her people, it helps her as a country, and it helps her future generations. That's why we believe that we should prioritize a system that is most environmentally sustainable. Now, obviously, we can acknowledge that if we were to make ESCOM bigger, we'd see the creation of more power stations, more coal mining facilities, more pollutants in the environment, more things that would cause harm. We can also acknowledge that we live in an era in which climate change is of mass importance. Countries like the UK are experiencing severe heat strokes. We cannot even predict the weather anymore because the climate is in dire situations. Thus, we as people should not be trying to make the situation worse, but rather trying to make it better. Firstly, how do we, as by protecting the status quo, make the climate situation better? Well, simply, we're not contributing to the problems. We're not building anything new, and we're not making the situation worse. How do they instead hurt the environment? Well, they make ESCOM bigger. They say we're going to produce more coal. We're going to make more electricity. We're going to make more pollutants, more. But when will it ever be enough? Well, it will be enough when we're all dead. So this is why we believe it is important and valuable to help the environment, because it needs to have a form of long-term sustainability. As we've been told, these private companies care about one thing: money. See, they don't care about the environment, right? These are not my words, these are theirs. They believe that because they care about money, they'll be more likely to help. Instead, we say because they are financially driven, they will cause damage. And this is the model that we'll be presented against. And this is the model that we believe should not be brought forward. Thus, the takeaways from this point is that if you stand with House opposition on the matter, you stand with the House that protects the childhoods of your children, your children's children, and future generations of South Africans. Now, my second point is that this will hurt our relationship with sub-Saharan African countries such as Namibia, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe, and it will leave them open to American and Chinese neocolonization. Now, firstly, we need to understand that we want to help we want the situation that helps the most amount of people, because as we understand, if other countries in sub-Saharan Africa are not in the best situation, this does in fact impact us, because they do not have the ability to produce such things as natural resources, and they do have people that come into South Africa seeking a better life. Now, these countries need our electricity for one simple reason: they did not have a similar economic situation to us. Thus, we as a country who can afford to produce excess electricity, sell this off to them, and they give us money in return. This, one, helps our economy, but it, two, also provides for their economy, as they are more likely to produce goods that we will be later able to barter and trade with. Now, neocolonization is the action of countries looking at sub-Saharan African countries or countries within South America, or within anywhere that has been previously hurt by the effects of colonization, and using those countries as a place to use as manipulating and trading relations. See, we believe that if we were to get rid of a governmental version of ESCOM, we'd see a version in which people within these countries would be more.
It's up. So
it's 7 minutes.
It's 5 minutes. Thanks, gents.
Is it 5?
7, sir. It's 7.
We gave 5 gents because of time. This is being live streamed. And we still have a seventh house. We've got a seventh house, but lawyers gonna debate. So we've been consistent in anyway.
Sir, you have to, it says in the document 7, sir.
Okay, sorry, reply.
Okay, well, in my opinion, there are 3 main clashes between our point and the other house. So first of all, the other house believes that privatizing ESCOM will root out corruption within the company, which obviously is an inherently naive interpretation of the issue. We won that case. Look at the examples I gave, such as Steinhoff. Money corrupts regardless of what type of state, if you have state-owned or privatization. Privatized companies actually have less accountability than state-owned ones, and thus more opportunity for corruption. The power is pushed into the hands of the top 1%. And which one of us wants that? Also, we clashed on the idea of whether privatized or capitalist companies provide better services. I have already shown, as with the examples of medical aid in America and DSTV, how privatized companies do not necessarily give better services than state-owned ones. And I believe that is also an inherently naive view to believe that privatizing ESCOM will mean the services we receive from it are better. While ICA has also shown that may there be better services, the impact on the environment will be extremely negative. Thirdly, the idea that privatization leads to more competition. This is a horrible viewpoint. Look at the world. Look at capitalism. Privatization does not necessarily create competition. Privatization creates monopolies. Look at the examples we gave of Disney controlling the entire American film industry, controlling places outside of the American film industry. Privatization means that these companies can buy up more companies and control more, pushing power into the hands of people who have no accountability because it's not a state-owned company. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Reply from the Fisher there. Gents, the Wi-Fi is a bit lagging at some point here. So, Josh Bulbury, you up next with your reply. Thanks.
Yes, it speaks.
Cool. 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon to the House at large. My name is Joshua Bulbury, I'm the first speaker for House Proposition, and I'm going to be returning to give the reply speech for the debate today. So within my speech, I'm going to be highlighting some of the main clashes in the debate, some of the main points that we brought up within the debate that were unchallenged, and overall stating why we as House Proposition provided a better context and a better case for South Africa, and a case which most benefits South Africans and South Africa as a whole, and stating why we as House Proposition have won this case. So within this debate, we got two very, very, very different versions of South Africa. Within our House Proposition's context, we were able to provide a context whereby South Africans and South Africa will be able to be a better place, and South Africans will be able to live in a better country with a better economy. We showed through our points that by privatizing Eskom, the utility provider is going to be able to provide a higher value of higher quality of service and provide more electricity to the whole country, so that things like load shedding do not exist anymore, and these sorts of problems that have been rampaging our country are cut out. So what this is going to mean, and what my second speaker briefly touched on, is that by stopping things like load shedding and by increasing the volume of electricity that's produced, we're going to be able to reduce load shedding, and we're going to be able to allow small businesses and businesses which make up a large part of South Africa's private sector and which contribute a lot to South Africa's GDP and South Africa's overall economy. We're going to be able to take these businesses and allow them to function at a higher rate, and allow them to function better, as they are not going to be able to be held back by load shedding, and they're going to be able to work for more hours and contribute to society as much as they can. And this benefits South Africa. Furthermore, South Africans living in the most underprivileged positions, like my second speaker spoke about, who are most prone to load shedding and long-term load shedding and face the worst effects of load shedding, these people are going to be able to benefit from this, as they now have more electricity and they don't face these problems anymore. But House Opposition came here and showed us a context whereby South Africa does not improve. If Eskom is to remain public, the corruption and the problems which are rampant within it and which it still faces every day now, they are not going to be able to be solved. We showed through our analysis how Eskom is a sinking ship of a company and how it cannot be saved. And without privatizing it, Eskom is doomed. The amount of electricity and the effect that it has on South Africa is just going to worsen and worsen to the point where the economy can no longer function and the economy collapses, and South Africans as a whole face the brunt of this, and we do not benefit from this. So thereby, based on the burden that I provided in my speech, that the House, which provides the best context for South Africa and provides the best scenario for South Africans is going to win this debate. And therefore, based on that, House Proposition has provided this context and we have won this debate. Thank you.
Okay, gents. That's the debate. Okay, any closing remarks from either adjudicators or anybody on the floor? Martin, you have something to say clearly?
So you robbed us, sir.
Okay.
Say you robbed us.
Okay. You would have been robbed if I had given somebody 7 minutes. So no one has gotten 7 minutes.
Okay, so it can't be held against us that you cut us off then.
No. Gents, we have Baloyi who entered the competition, so they have to be in the schedule somewhere. So no one has gotten 7 minutes. So anyway,
extra.
Piece of advice: focus on making your point. For 20 minutes, 20 seconds, you guys are going then you'll crap on time.
Yes,
Get to the
sir.
point. I thought you were a top English student.
Just get to the point and stop crying about time.
Martin, bro. I'd like to hop off, chief.
So, gents,
No, it's okay.
thanks there. We'll have Marion McRobert coming in just now. But I've requested that Nafisha stays, please, to get the motion. Obviously, they'll go against Baloy. So Nafisha,
No,
you bring-
so can I compete for Boloy?
Baloy has a team already.
Okay, so can I compete for Nafisha? So it'll be me and Francois.
Because it's a friendly in any case for you guys,
That's
but for
the
them
team.
it's for points.
Me and Francois will be the Dusted team. You can call
Yeah,
us the
it's
Dusted team against
It's
Boloy.
fine, you guys can do that. It will be a nice friendly for you guys, but they are actually going to be getting scored because I'd like to have Baloy on the scoreboard this year.
Sure.
All good?
All good, sir.
Hey.
Just thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'ams.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Wait. God. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm so nosy, Rob.
Are you filming now?
I know you are, Franco.
Sir, come here. We can fight. If you want to fight, we can fight. Sir, I'm waiting. So we're gonna throw. I'm not picking up.
Francha, we know where you are. We can see you in the Nafisha common room.
Ma'am, everyone can come. We can fight everyone if you want, ma'am. We'll debate.
It's fine. We're ready. We'll go. Let's go.
Okay, Francois, just get a stain on the pole.
So I feel like if you have something to say, you should come say it to my face.
Bet.
Yes, sir. So did KJ get his motion? KJ, that's the next debate.
Say that again, Martin.
So did KJ get the motion?
No, he's supposed to get onto the meat and he's not. So we agreed to just let it be.
Alright. Okay.
Anyway, so last debate of the day.
Should I message Matthew Taylor, the guy from
We're waiting for the speakers to jump on the meet quickly. Yeah. Peter Dutoit, you here?
Alright, so.
Okay, Martin, your
Yes,
guys
I
are
am. Tosa is also here, so we're going to speak with the same computer since we are in a dorm together.
Can you just switch your camera on so that the adjudicator can see? Oh, okay, Martin. Yeah, Peter, please do that.
Yes, I will now.
Okay, remember to introduce yourself and the house you're in for the speaker to be aware. Adjudicators to be aware. Yeah. What class are you in, Martin?
We're in the LEC,
Is
so.
that, or is that the LEC? I thought it was my classroom. I was going to ask you to get out.
So you know your classroom is my classroom. So.
Okay, we're waiting for McRobert to have the cameras on, just to make sure that Peter Dutoit is not actually debating by himself and changing voices. There you go. All right. So it's McRobert versus Mari. If I can just... So the motion is, this house regrets the Rainbow Nation narrative. Okay, it's quite an easy one, but it's gonna get spicy and real. So looking forward to hearing your points there. In proposition, we have McRobert. In opposition, we have Mari House. So first speaker of House proposition, get yourself ready and you can count yourself down.
3, 2, 1. Good afternoon to the House at large. I, Peter de Toy, will be the first speaker, and my second speaker will be Tose Seklalehosi. We believe that the Rainbow Nation ideology has disadvantaged South Africa socially and economically, which has led to a worsened quality of life for all South Africans. The statement of a Rainbow Nation describes how South Africans' diverse nation with people of all colors from all backgrounds living within unity. However, this idea was never applied by the government post-1994. In 1995, the corruption of South Africa's government was at its all-time high. Since 1994, South Africa's murder rate has increased from 60 people per 100,000 people to 70 people per 100,000 people in 2022. This has led to South Africa's financial situation worsening drastically, which is evident in the dollar to exchange rate in 1993 being 3 Rand 19 cents to the dollar and is currently sitting at 16 Rand 55 cents to the dollar. In conclusion, since the introduction of the ideology of the Rainbow Nation in South Africa, a drastic negative impact on South Africa in all aspects especially economically, is evident. Thank you.
Thank you, House Proposition, for your speech there. We'll allow Mari, Team Opposition. Please give your name and surname and house you're in. A bit of a team talk going on there.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Good afternoon, panel. My name is Tiago Gonzalez, and I'm the first speaker for Murray. I'll be accompanied by Martin Forsloo, our second speaker. Today, I'll be presenting the principle in today's debate. I'm going to rebuttal against the debate of Mac Robert. What is the Rainbow Nation narrative? It is aiming at diversity. And the TRC, the Truth Reconciliation Council, did exactly that. In today's debate, we're going to show you why we need to foster inclusivity over aware separation in order to establish the best society for South Africa. We burden you to create a mechanism that shows how promoting inclusivity has harmful effects. The Rainbow Nation narrative played its most impactful role in the 1994 elections. This is a time in South Africa's history where it was vitally important to transition peacefully into a country that promoted the ideas of the Freedom Charter. We need to establish peace, economic stability, economic redistribution, and restorative justice. Today, we define the Rainbow Nation narrative as the promotion of an inclusive, diverse society, and we will take the counterfactual as being aware of our separateness and targeting the disadvantaged. Promoting inclusivity is what allowed the establishments of the Truth and Reconciliation Council, Workspace Initiatives, and Employment Equities Act. It is those establishments which allow us to integrate and peacefully transition into a country that aims to cooperate and build on the values of the Freedom Charter. Thank you.
Okay, here you have it. That is first speaker from opposition. Great speech there. So now we have second speaker from...
So when is the protected time? Or no protected time?
No protected time, actually, because we've not defined that beginning of our debate sessions.
No problem.
Have been like that. Okay, cool. So we have Mac Robert, Tim Prop, going second speaker. Reply. Okay, Mac Robert, you are next, actually. Susa and Peter, are you there?
I am the second speaker, Sostala Khosi, of the proposition side. Now I would like to begin with my rebuts. The first speaker spoke about how apartheid or the Rainbow Nation brought about equalizing the separation. But in actual fact, the idea of the Rainbow Nation is very problematic because it's basically an idea that those racial classifications still exist, that we are separate but together. In other words, the TRC was only a component of the transition to the full and free democracy. But let me start with my case. Apartheid took advantage of the racial, cultural, and gender differences when it was finally abolished in 1994. South Africa introduced a new ideology in the name of nation building, rainbowism. This was intended to emphasize the similarities and equality rather than focus on the differences and to combat racism and discrimination. As a result of this approach, race, gender, and class do not matter. There's a generation of students who believe there is only humanity in existence. These students grew up believing that deep inside, all people were equal, and that if they work hard enough, they would prosper. This worldview is problematic on many levels. It focuses on the part of multiculturalism that is comfortable for white minorities. At the same time, it rejects
POI.
POI.
Would you like me?
POI accepted.
Cool. So when we're talking about like the Rainbow Nation narrative, right? So we're talking about literally a rainbow, right? Which means that there are separate lines there, right? So we're not talking about like one big pot of us not seeing color and us not seeing race and stuff like that. It's literally defined in the name. So if you continue with that narrative, we're going to have a definition challenge, and that's going to be problematic for the rest of this debate. So if you could redefine it and explain how classism is actually part of a narrative that you want to run, then we can have a better, more constructive debate. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, let's look at the metaphor rainbow. Rainbows can be a full circle. However, the observer normally sees only an arc formed. So looking at it this way, the narrative of the Rainbow Nation, basically in our term, is okay, for us to truly be equal, we should all see the same thing. And the fact that now that we the fact that we now acknowledge that they are lines shows that okay, in the beginning, that there is a separation, but then this separation is a separation where, or the rainbowism is a separation, but a separation that's together, if you get what I'm trying to say. Okay, let me carry on. This worldview is problematic on many levels. It focuses on the part of multiculturalism that is comfortable for white minorities. At the same time, it rejects all attempts to address systematic inequalities. It results in nullifying and silencing people's lived experiences of oppression. Recently, the Rainbow Nation caught fire. As academics, we have seen this firsthand in the classroom. At first glance, in universities, it is racially integrated. However, student interactions are still heavily influenced by race, culture, language, and socioeconomic background. Privilege is a particular complex, emotional, and difficult topic to discuss. Academics strive to find ways to help students understand inequality and the structural upbringings. Ideology students avoid the discomfort of talking about systematic injustice. How can we allow conversations about race, class, and gender to return to the classroom without being emotionally damaging or diverse? The Rainbow Nation has overcome the violent racial oppression of its past and was fighting apartheid's toxic legacy of economic inequality. It had one of the most progressive constitutions in the world and had a steady record of economic growth. The challenges the new democracy faced were all too evident, but South Africa's recent history seemed a message of hope for all of us. Nonetheless, violent protests, looting, vandalism have left the country in a state of stagnation. The economy was already faltering even before COVID struck and has now sustained a further catastrophic blow. Now, xenophobia. Despite the Rainbow Nation moniker, South Africa has proven to be a nation of hostility towards foreigners. Xenophobic attitudes run rampant throughout population, and racially charged outbreaks of violence have plagued the nation post-apartheid. Brutal beatings and mob lootings happen frequently in townships where many immigrants live alongside Black South Africans. For example, in February 2017, Nigerians living in the capital of Pretoria were targeted by angry mobs, destroying their homes and businesses. The worst outbreak of violence in recent years was in May 2008, when South Africa was rocked by a violent series of xenophobic riots that broke out across the nation. Neighbors turned against neighbors as mobs took to beatings, raping in mass in townships. By the end, 62 people were dead, dozens were raped, and more than 100,000 people were displaced. These riots were undeniably xenophobic in nature. How did South Africa, the rainbow nation, become such a violent xenophobic society? In Nelson Mandela's 1994 presidential inaugural speech, Mandela proclaimed, "Never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another." One of the most famous phrases in South Africa's constitution, is the line that quotes, "South Africa belongs to all who live in it, and in united in our diversity." The promised post-apartheid renaissance for marginalized Black South Africans was never arrived. Instead, the government is widely perceived as having failed to address both economic crisis and mounting social unrest. Now, economic points. Number one, in apartheid, the system worked mainly because the old regime ran the economy very conservatively and created stability via various mechanisms like the financial rand, exchange controls, etc. After 1994, government expenditure was not used productively, as it was used to cater for people's feelings and emotions more than actual development needs for the economy. Point number three, this was then financed through domestic debt and then later BRICS money. The problem is that debt has to be repaid, but the standards that built the previous strong economy was abandoned in favor of emotional and nonsensical touchy-feely things like name changes, elaborate parties, and overseas trips, government propaganda, legal fees, and lastly, social grants to try and keep the people happy. Debts were not repaid, and this created instability. Instability breeds uncertainty, and uncertain people do not spend their money. With no spending came recession, and basically jobs were shed. This led to more taxes and levies, etc., becoming necessary to bankroll the swollen government. This in turn killed everything critical, and thus the economy was even more sick. Reverse racism, oppression, discrimination are still evident in South Africa. Now let's consider the number one complaint of white people against the BEE, that it is against our constitutional rights. Okay, let's look at the relevant section of the Bill of Rights. The state may not, unfortunately, discriminate directly or indirectly against anyone on one or more grounds, including race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, and birth. No person may unfortunately discriminate directly or indirectly against one or on one or more grounds in terms of subsection. National legislation must be enacted to prevent or prohibit unfair discrimination. Discrimination on one or more grounds listed in subsection 3 is unfair unless established that the discrimination is fair. Now, discrimination is an interesting contradiction, but South Africa is full of interesting contradiction, isn't it? In this specific case, you can see the government's reasoning as well.
Okay, Speaker, time is up. Surely, way ahead. Thanks. Great speech, kid. All right. Mari, second speaker.
The judge is ready. I'm just going to use a timer and then I'll count myself down. Three, two, one. Good morning to the House at large. Today I want to deep dive as wide is inclusivity, not exclusivity, that allows humans to relate empathize, and change their actions. Today, we've done a narrative split. We've defined the debate on the context that the Rainbow Nation is something along the lines of an inclusivity, of the promotion of an inclusive society, right? So we take a lot of like the jargon that was being spoken from House proposition, that it's something of like, okay, we're a happy Rainbow Nation and we're gonna like progress to something of like, you know, a peaceful unity and something like that, right? And so we take their like counterfactual in their world as something being along the lines of like the Black Lives Matter approach of like, okay, we have separate, you know, needs, and those needs need certain amounts of addressing, right? So that's why it becomes very important to establish exactly what the Rainbow Nation narrative does in the context of this debate, where it is like kind of fall into already, right? So let's do the split of the economic and the social aspects. So economically, we get a lot of the ideas that, okay, we're trying to sway the focus away from the real issues and we're ignoring the problems. That's kind of what we're getting from House proposition. So what we're actually saying is that the Rainbow Nation narrative is aiming towards something, right? So what this looks like is we're stuck in a society where we could either choose to focus on our separateness, and that separateness being, okay, for example, the townships need A, or we could look at it holistically, right? And that's exactly what happened post-94. We looked at the country in a holistic perspective and we decided, okay, holistically moving forward, we don't just need to shove our resources in disadvantaged communities, but we need to redistribute our resources in order to allow the economy to be sustainable moving forward, right? So for example, this would look like the slow development of BEE, right? It started out as the Economic Equalities Act, right? And then it progressed to BEE, right? It had the holistic perspective of understanding that there are needs of certain people within the country, and the holistic understanding that we need to progress towards something and that things can't be immediately addressed. So furthermore, I think it's really important for us to remember that it's positive reinforcement of change rather than like the spiraling down of a negative feedback loop of problems that sustains progression moving forward, right? So when we focus on like the separateness and the problems that certain areas of society have, and we neglect others, it means that the positive aspects of society, for example, like the rich white people that we have, then can't be utilized in order to empower the poor Black communities, for example, right? When we divide people and we separate them, we remove the positive from being able to balance the negative. So in today's debate, like I want to emphasize the fact that like peace happens not really when war stops, but rather when the fighting seems unreasonable. So in our world, we have created the establishments that made conflict unreasonable. Thousands of political and tribalist conflicts stopped when people through the TRC and various other media outlets started to realize that they had a shared trauma that was induced through the apartheid ideology of separate living. In your world, where you run in your world, what we have is at best nothing, where these wars continue, or at worst, what we're doing is we're feeding the warmongers and we're feeding this identity politics of hate, which just permeates and separates us further. What House proposition is proposing is a state where we are constantly at war and there is no healing from the trauma that we have all experienced. Secondly, on the economic front, we have this conception that like yeah, sure.
With your previous statement, can you provide evidence, please?
With my previous statement, yeah, for sure. I mean, I provided it in the argument, right? So, for example, okay. So, what does the TRC exactly do, right? So, the TRC is the committee that we established post '94 in order to like commit a whole bunch of restorative justice in South Africa, right? So we looked at the country, we're like, okay, we could just punish everyone and we could like make everybody extremely mad because, you know, there are objective laws that many white people broke through the apartheid system. Or what we could instead do is allow people to share their trauma, allow people to then come forth and say why I did these certain things, allow people to understand what happened in the past so that things could move forward and be established better, right? That's exactly what the mechanism of action with the TRC did. And that then allowed both white and Black people to empathize with this shared trauma and be able to cooperate and live in a society peacefully. Right. So
Um,
that's your
you are
evidence. No,
again.
thank you. So moving forward to the economic standpoint, right? We get this like weird argument along the lines of like the apartheid was economically stable and we have bad economic policies today. I'm not exactly sure how those things relate to the Rainbow Nation narrative, but so what exactly does the Rainbow Nation narrative do that is positive towards the economic embetterment of our country, right? So the biggest problem in the South African scheme of economic problems is the fact that there is like a very large concentration of white monopoly capital, and that needs to be distributed to a very large population of people that were disenfranchised in the past, right? So that's the core problem that we face in South Africa today. We face that because of the apartheid system, right? We face that because of the system. The system created the lack of economic stability, right? And therefore, when we take the approach of deciding to choose an inclusive society, it harks back to my points earlier, where we're able to see an holistic growth of this. We're able to see a holistic growth of our country's economy, right? So we're able to take into account the fact of okay, so we need to redistribute the land, right? So when we're talking about redistributing the land, for example, in the Rainbow Nation, right? We're more than welcoming the idea that, okay, it's not just take the land away, but it's also being able to realize that these white people need to be able to create mechanisms for Black people to be able to use the land in a sustainable manner moving forward, right? It's understanding that because I'm part of the society, because I'm an actor in the society, I also have a responsibility too, right? It's understanding that the white farm owner now has a responsibility not only to lose his land, but also to be able to develop that land and make sure that it has a sustainable growth moving forward, right? Economically speaking, socially speaking, we have showed you why mechanistic.
Thank you for that, Martin. Wonderful speech there. Okay, now we are going to have replies. Mari, you go with the reply. Tim up.
So am I allowed to give the reply?
Yeah, you're allowed to give your reply. It's not stated in the document that the second speaker can't give a reply. If it was stated otherwise, then we would not have it.
Cool, thanks. So, good morning to the panel. I am the second speaker for House Opposition, and I'm coming back to deliver the reply speech, right? So there's a couple strategic concessions that we see that has happened in today's debate, right? First of all, we see the main strategic concession being the fact that they've lost the definitional challenge in today's debate, right? So it's been a really messy debate. There's been a lot of very arbitrary storylines happening in today's debate. But the key thing that's going to play on who wins and who loses today's debate is understanding that is the understanding of the definition today, right? So at the point that House proposition concedes the idea that we gave in my POI to them in their second speech, when they concede that idea that there is a separateness and that the goal is inclusivity, then we allow the mechanisms that we have put forth in today's debate to take full action and be prioritized, right? So let's break down the arguments that have been presented in today's debate and see who comes out on top and who comes out lower, right? So on the social front, we get the idea from House proposition that the Rainbow Nation narrative ignores the problems in society and tries to move away from them and idealizes this idea of happiness and peace that isn't a real thing in society, right? However, we've proved to you that the Rainbow Nation narrative has the constructs, right, that allowed the mechanisms to be built in South Africa, which allowed diversity and inclusivity to come forth, right? So we gave you examples of the Truth and Reconciliation Council. We gave you examples of the the Employment Equities Act, right? And we showed you how mechanistically those doctrines were built on the idea of a rainbow nation and how they have then helped build a more stable society for us to interact in, right? So therefore we win that point. Secondly, economically speaking, we've showed you how their argument of like a bad past and of like a good past and like a better future, something along those lines, isn't really relevant to today's debate, and they fail to kind of show emphasis and create the link between those two concepts. But furthermore, we've also showed you why why the mechanisms that were born out of the ideology of the Rainbow Nation were able to positively influence our country's economic standpoint. And therefore, we win today's debate. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for respecting your time allocation. Great speech. We will have now reply from Team Proposition.
Second speaker from the proposition side, and I'd like to further substantiate my points. The opposition side has spoken about inclusivity and the overall benefits of the inclusivity that comes with the Rainbow Nation, but they have ignored the fact that the Rainbow Nation or idea, in actual sense, is just an idea, and there have been no there haven't been any it's idea and no action. There have not been any things set in place to actually give this idea of, okay, we're going to include people. And some of the mechanisms that have been brought, for example, from what I've understood is, let's say, BEE, giving back the land, things like that, are a little bit misconstrued, because those things promote reverse racism. And let me explain. Reverse racism is, in the sense of BEE, is basically putting black people above white people. For example, employment law basically has put black women give a job first than a black man, then progressively through the 8 other color shades, and white people are last in that queue. A white male, additionally, if the black person is not a card-carrying member of the ANC, the chances are also reduced. In an economy that is managed by corrupt ANC people, this youth that is managed by corrupt ANC people, the youth aged 15 to 24 years are the most vulnerable in the South African labor market, as the unemployment rate among this age group was shot up 52.2%. Now, on another economical point that they have brought up, you look at how the financial situation worsened drastically, which is evident in the dollar to rand exchange rate, being in 1993, the exchange rate was 3 rand to 19 to the dollar, and is currently 16 to 55. Another point is the Rainbow Nation has opened the gateway for corruption, which can be seen during 2008 with the whole Zuma movement. Corruption has shot up. Socially as well, the murder rate has increased from 60 people per 100,000 people to 70 people per 100,000 people in 2022. Now, lastly, now let's kindly explain, could they kindly explain why there is still reverse racism through economic factors such as the BEE, which we have shown that, okay, we do understand that the Rainbow Nation is a great movement, although there are many loopholes, and these loopholes are what we are trying to address, not trying to promote what the opposition side is pinning against us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Your time is 3 minutes, 10 seconds, actually. Great debate, great round, you guys. You sounded very knowledgeable on the topic. Anything from you guys? The floor, adjudicators, anybody? All good. All right. Obviously, there's some inexperience or some sharpening evidence in some of you guys, but some of you guys are well versed in these circles, and it was shown today that how you structure an argument and how you actually make sure that you provide mechanisms or examples, real life situations versus policies and doctrines, or just superficial evidence that you're just throwing out there. So quite cool. We will read out the results at Culture Week, the final day of Culture Week. Otherwise, great chat, boys. Anything you want to say to the adjudicators? It is the last round. Please say something nice.
We just want to thank the adjudicators so much for spending your time in St. Albans. We know that you probably have very busy lives to attend to, so we do really appreciate coming out and on such a short notice. Thank you so much through sitting through all our probably confusing and somewhat, horrible speeches, but we really do appreciate it. And from St. Albans' side, we just want to say a big thanks.
Ma'am Delmeda is also in the room, you guys.
Well, I mean, thank you so much for having us. It was lovely to see what you have come up with. The differences in your juniors and seniors is very, it's enlightening to see that you can grow, that there is that room for growth, and also just to see the different ways and the different perspectives that you have and how they influence your debating skills.
From our side, we'd like to thank you for taking the time out, to facilitate this. And also the feedback that you've given us is constructive, especially since we are inexperienced, and we love seeing the talent here. And thank you from our opposition side, for giving us a challenge and, showing us where we should be going and how to conduct such a thing.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye, James.
Bye, Mom.
Enjoy the rest of the Culture Week, boys. Bye. Okay, Dirk, that's the end of our debate sessions. Kudos.